I don't know. I think certain administrations read it differently, and it's just disingenuous. They're not lying. It's just disingenuous. It's not cohesive. I don't know.
No, but whose fault is that it's not cohesive? Whose fault?
Someone has to take blame.
The county should take the blame.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know. Well, I don't want to. Hi, people. 2 people. 14 people. Wow, huge jump. Give a couple minutes on this very dreary, rainy day. I hope they can hear you because I have you kind of like propped up on a box and it covers my speaker. So hopefully when you talk, Heather, they can hear you.
Okay.
Let's hope for the best. All right, so I don't know, do we have any general announcements so far that we can start this video with? I did read that the AP exam, that they're going to be emailing a link 2 days before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so to start off, because I know exactly what Ms. Green is going to say, make sure your contact information is correct with College Board. Make sure you log into the College Board website and make sure that your email and phone number is up to date, because 2 days before the exam, they're going to be emailing you a code that you will use on exam day to go into the exam to the browser. So important that you have that.
Yeah, and make sure you're not that person that doesn't do this, and then the exam comes and you're like, I'm not receiving any emails from College Board, and you're freaking out, and we can't help you because you haven't logged into the College Board account.
All right. I have a student saying they got an email earlier this week. What does it mean? But then they showed me no email. Maybe I'm just waiting on the text. I don't see an email. Well, we'll find out. I'm trying not to throw out too much information because I don't want to flood you guys with stuff and then, oh, we can talk about that. Okay, so it says, Dear parent, good news about this year's exams. 1, they're shorter. 2, they'll only focus on what your child covered in class. 3, there's no limit on scores. 4, colleges will give credit. They're just giving you an update on what the exam will be. We know it's shorter because it's 25 minutes for one response and 15 minutes for the other response instead of like the hour and 45 minutes you would have taken it. They're explaining that you're only going to be tested on what we covered in class, which is units 1 to 5, right? Fundamentals of geography to agriculture. After that, we're not going to be tested on that. So you don't have to worry about that. They're making that very clear. What you're probably confused on is part 3, where it says there are no limit to the amount of 3, 4s, and 5s. This is what I have mentioned multiple times and what people do not understand about AP Human or any of the AP classes. Theoretically, there could be 100% pass rate, but they grade on a bell curve. So they see all the results of the scores, and then they figure out where that medium is, and they go, okay, these are all the 3s. This is the cutoff. So everyone who scored this and above passes, and everyone who scored this and below doesn't, right? They're not grading on a bell curve this year. That means they have a set standard. They're like, if you get this many points, you pass, which is different from the past. So that is a shocking revelation to a lot of students and a lot of teachers. They did not know that because you have to go into this. It's not you versus College Board. Unfortunately, it's you versus every other student taking this. And that's why you have to do as best as you can to be better than those other students. Now, that isn't it this year because they're clearly communicating that it's going to be a straightforward, these are the, the amount of scores that you can get, and there's going to be an unlimited amount. And they're also guaranteeing that colleges will still take the credit, right? Which is really important because we want to make sure that colleges, accept the hard work you've done for the year. Cool. All right, I think that's enough time. Wow, there's only 43 people here. 43. 43 is who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Miss Green, by the way, on my phone. Good thing we're doing social distance. Yeah, yikes indeed. Oh, all right. Well, let's go through this quick then. All right, as you stare at me as I look at my screen blankly. First, let's talk about the multiple choice. Now, Unit 4, hands down, probably one of the most important units in AP Human Geography, right next to population and migration, personally. And now that we have lost Unit 6 and 7, it is incredibly important that you understand Unit 4, because we've learned that there's so much vocab in Unit 4, and it all relates to each other, and it's all very applicable right now, especially throughout the entire world. It really encapsulates everything that we have learned. It's kind of like the link between first semester content and second semester content, because you had to know all that first semester content to understand this part, but then it would be the launch pad to understand everything else. So critically important that you understand this unit. Looking at question 1, which of the following is not a necessary criterion of a state? And that would be C, a common culture and identity. Remember, what makes a state? Boundaries, people, and sovereignty, right? That's really what a state needs. I mean, in a government, but that comes along with sovereignty. Having a similar culture or identity isn't important into saying a state, because if you say everybody needs to have a common culture or identity, you're instantly eliminating multi-ethnic or multinational states, right? Remember your vocab words here. So we know that states can have a ton of different cultures, or they can have a single culture. What makes a state? Boundaries, government, sovereignty, people, stuff like that. Question 2. People who all consider themselves part of a stateless nation share all the following characteristics except what? So in this one, we have to find the factually incorrect answer. And this would be C, a formal government recognized by other countries. That's sovereignty. And they do not have that. Stateless nations do not have that. Now, they have a certain level of autonomy, very little autonomy, but they do not have a government. All right, on to 3. Argentina, both a national legislature and 23 provincial legislatures, which exercise power separately from the national legislature. What type of government do they have? It'd be a federal government. So that's A. 4, which supranational organization focused on the production of oil? That would be OPEC. Now, look, I have an issue with this question. Ms. Green has an issue with this question too. I don't like, or we don't like, that they're called supranational organizations, because OPEC didn't take sovereignty from those countries, right? NATO, NAFTA. To me, if you get asked a question on the AP exam, if you get an FRQ about supranational organizations, keep it simple, be straightforward, just write the EU, right? Now, I mean, if they bring up production of oil, go, okay, fine, it's OPEC. But if they're just asking a general question about supranational organizations, your first answer should be EU. There should be zero hesitation with that. And now if they hit you with the question, you can't use the EU, you need to use the AU, the African Union, because they're modeling themselves after the EU anyway, so you could net some easy points there. So just keep it simple, guys. Don't try and complicate it. All right, so 5. Which groups have been gaining more local power around the world as a result of devolution? That would be indigenous people. Look, I can rant about devolution and autonomy and the different types of states for hours. My students have seen me do it. Understand the levels of devolution between minor devolution and major devolution, and how that looks like for indigenous peoples. Minor devolution gives them a little more autonomy, but not sovereignty. Right? They get more say over their region, but they're not completely sovereign where they can break off. That would be a result of major devolution, where these people are gaining sovereignty. They are gaining that land, and they cannot be controlled by that outside state. Going on to 6, the centralized power of the unitary state is most likely to be threatened by the development of what? And it would be A, a self-governing region. Guys, if there's a self-governing region inside of a state, inside of a unitary state, that means it's probably some group that's different ethnically, or they view themselves different nationality-wise, and they are undergoing this idea of self-determination. And that's a very scary thing for a unitary state where all the power is focused on the central government. And this would be a strong centrifugal force. Moving on to 7. Today, nations act to establish control over disputed areas of the sea primarily by what? And that would be D, engaging in economic activities in coastal areas and open waters. Look, we went on a long journey talking about the laws of the sea and how there's no real land to fight over anymore unless you're some type of stateless nation or something like that. But established countries have now expanded their territorial disputes out to the sea. And we watched videos on it. We talked about how the Arctic Circle is, constantly fought over because there's new resources being exposed with the effects of the planet warming up and ice melting. And they're extending their EEZs and their sovereign borders to try and get those resources from other countries. And then you get organizations like the Arctic Circle, which is trying to delegate who gets what. And you also have the UN law of the sea. We've seen this in the South China Sea. So there's tons of examples for you to use here when talking about this. Hopefully, maybe not hopefully we get an FRQ, but if we do, we'll be ready. All right, 8. A federal state is likely to possess multiple systems of checks and balances. A federal state is a state and federal government splitting power equally. I don't know. It is pretty straightforward. 8 is D. 9, the geographic boundary of a state can also be a physical boundary, such as what? And that would be a lake or mountain. Guys, every other type of potential boundary is cultural. So remember, go over your boundaries and know that you have physical and cultural boundaries. And then all the different types of cultural boundaries. One's based off math, one's based off, I forget right now. Geometric and ethnic, that's what the other one was, which boundaries based on ethnicity or boundaries based on language, religion, whatever makes up ethnicity, right? So understand all your different breakdowns of boundaries. All right, 10. One example of a geometric political boundary is E, the straight line between the states of Colorado and Kansas. Guys, remember, straight lines, they're geometric. It's math. It's made up. It's cultural. All right, 11. In democratic nations, legislators and political parties typically redraw boundaries for voting districts after the release of data from the census. Guys, that's not my favorite topic to teach AP Human. I don't understand why it's in here. But you do have to know about redistricting and gerrymandering. And that's what they're talking about here. 12, a separation fence, such as that which exists on the territory between India and Pakistan, is most often used to demarcate what? And that would be the ceasefire line. Remember, after talking about the effects of devolution or the unintended consequences of them, we have seen boundaries get placed in certain parts of the world. And when we see this devolution happen, those boundaries are drawn, in the case of India and Pakistan, following those ethnic boundaries. And it resulted in absolute chaos. And we've also seen these boundaries get drawn where they don't care about ethnicity, where they're superimposed. And we see a sudden major devolution, say with Britain and Europe and Africa, giving those African colonies statehood and drawing these superimposed lines, and all of a sudden there was chaos. So no matter what, when we talk about these different examples, understand that we can use the terms devolution and the different boundaries and centrifugal forces, and they all play into each other when we talk about these. These aren't exclusive concepts. I think I have, okay. All right, and then 13, a nation state is often defined by its twin attributes of sovereignty and what? And that would be ethnic homogeneity. So guys, all you gotta remember with a nation state is that a majority of the people are the same ethnicity, are the same nationality, which is a very strong centripetal force, right? And some states will even lie about their nation state status as a way to convince its people or to get people to believe into that, right? We see this specifically in Spain. Spain is not a nation state, but they claim to be one. But we also know there's devolution happening there in Catalonia and the Basque region, which can also be used as great examples for FRQs, or literally the one that you guys did this week. All right, 14, gerrymandering is a practice in which political party attempts to gain an unequal advantage by C, changing the boundaries of a legislative district. I'm not gonna go over gerrymandering that much. It's not that big of a concept. When a sovereign state undergoes a political process of devolution, it grants some of the powers to D, its central government, to its regional governments. Remember, this is a classic example of minor devolution. Now, where have we seen minor devolution? Where a federal government is going to give power to a lower state government. We see it in Canada, which is a multi-ethnic, right? Multi-ethnic, or is it multinational? I forget. Ms. Green? What's Canada? Multi-ethnic or multinational?
I would have to look it up.
I know, I totally forget. But the fact is, they got the Quebec area, right? And we know that Quebec is its own region. We know they can make their own laws. We know they have their own ethnicity, their own nationality. I think they're multinational. Maybe. No. It doesn't matter. Look, at the end of the day, this is a classic example of a federal government giving power, giving autonomy, devolving power to a state region, right? Can Quebec do whatever they want? No. Can the Canadian government implement laws in Quebec? Yes. So while the what? Multinational? Multinational. So while they have devolved power and given them some autonomy, they have not given them complete sovereignty. We've also seen this in the multinational state, the UK, right? Because the individual regions are not their own countries. They were given power, right? As much as the birthday girl Ella likes to believe, and happy birthday, that Scotland is a state, it's not. It's a multinational region, multinational state that devolves power to the nationalities, but does not give them sovereignty. Sorry, I had to give the birthday shout out. All right. 16. Which best describes the main difference between ethnicity and nationality? Nationality is connected to the state. Ethnicity is tied to the culture. The answer is A. Can those two things be the same? Absolutely. We see those in nation states. One of the classic examples of supranationalism is the EU, because this body of member states has what? And the answer here is A. They have transferred some of the power to the central authority. And why I don't like that OPEC one, because they don't give power to OPEC, but I digress. 18. The United Nations has a policy of using economic and military sanctions to limit the sovereign powers of C, any country that disrupts international peace. They can do that. And remember, the UN is not a supranational organization because people don't give power to the UN. All the member states just kind of agree that they'll work together to punish those states that don't follow the guidelines of international peace that they agree on. But by no means is anybody legally obligated to follow what the UN implements. All right, then 19, which of the following areas describes a conflict region between various ethnic groups, including Serbs, Albanians, and Bosnians? I hope none of you got this wrong. It is D, the Balkan Peninsula. And guys, this is when we use the B word. And we never use that word unless we're talking about the Balkan Peninsula or we're talking about Yugoslavia, because that's balkanization. I swear, do not write balkanization anywhere on any FRQ if they aren't talking about Yugoslavia. It's not devolution. Don't put it as devolution. It makes it too convoluted. Just keep it simple, please, for me. All right, and then 20, over the past half century, the number of sovereign states in the world has increased by more than 100. I hope you didn't put E because there aren't over 1,000 states in the world, but there are a lot of them. I think we're at 213 officially or something like that, maybe 218. I don't know. But I know it's over 200. And the fact is that we've seen this because, I mean, look in Africa, literally, that we can use that as our classic example here. That entire continent was all colonies. And in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they fought and earned their freedom and sovereignty, thus creating new states. There's 54 states in Africa. So not counting every other continent in the world, it has to be increased by over 100. Okay, so that was the multiple choice. If anybody has any questions, please send me a message on Remind. Otherwise, I am moving on to the FRQs. Well, FRQ, which I don't think I have any. Ms. Green, do you have any?
Nope, we're good.
All right. Let's do it. So in this FRQ, classic FRQ, really, really good one. I read this one in the AP for the AP readers that year. And it was very eye-opening how many kids don't understand the concept of devolution along with teachers. So it's really important to understand this concept because it connects to so many other concepts. And the first one was simply define devolution. Now, the first answer they put in the rubric was the breakup of a state, which if you put that, then yeah, technically you're correct. But remember, they only added that because in an older FRQ, they accepted that answer. But if you really want to define devolution, the best definition and the one all of you should be using is the movement of power from the central government to regional governments, or to a regional group, because that transfer of power can be minor in giving them more autonomy and having their own government control, or it could be major in giving them a chunk of land and their own state. That definition ticks both of those boxes, while the breakup of a state does not, because devolution doesn't always result in the breakup of a state. Otherwise, Canada would be 2 states. The UK would be 4 different states. So I understand why they got upset, but I understand that they put it in there because in previous FRQs, they accepted it. But now in 2020, you should really be focusing on the fact that devolution is that giving of power from the central government to a regional government. And that power is different based on the situation. There are other answers or other definitions in the rubric. You can look at those, but it essentially explains the same thing, that transfer of power. All right, moving on to point B. Describe how each of the following forces contributes to devolutionary pressures within a country. Okay, so devolutionary pressures are centrifugal forces, things that force a place apart, right? So for the first one, it says cultural diversity. Really easy question here to answer. All you got to put is if there's differences in language, religion, history, ethnicity, that'll tear people apart. At the end of the day, being different from other people, it's great. It's a good thing to build. It opens you up to new cultures. But when you're trying to agree on government, or you have some historical difference between 2 groups of people, that can't be mended easily. And that can lead to more centrifugal forces and eventually devolutionary powers acting upon a state. Then you see self-determination and all that stuff. All right, regional economic differences. So this is a case where now you have to talk about economics. And obviously, how can economic differences affect a place? Well, look at Belgium with the Flemish and the Walloons. One of their main points was that you have a very wealthy area and then you have a very poor area. And the wealthy people are going, why is our tax dollars going towards them, right? Now, in a nation state, you're not going to have that problem, because in a nation state, everybody is the same, and they go, or people will still be upset, but maybe not as upset, because they see those people as same team, right? We're the same ethnicity, same language, same religion, same background, same history, same nationality. So it's okay that we're helping. I'm upset about it, but I'm glad. Whereas in the case with Belgium, you have, the same example of, okay, the wealthy part's helping the poor part, but on top of that, you're adding, your cultural diversity, centrifugal forces to add to that issue. But we can also use the example in the actual FRQ with Spain. We know from videos that Catalonia is a very wealthy region of Spain. They get a lot of tourism, they have a lot of industry, and they generate a lot of tax revenue for Spain. And when Catalonia goes, well, why is all our money going towards, Madrid and the rest of Spain, and you're not helping us? That's going to create division within a state. But we're going to hold off because we are going to use those examples in Part C. And then finally, physical geography and territorial size. Guys, I know this maybe seem vague to some of you or confusing to some of you, but big countries cause division. I don't know how else to put that. If you have a giant country where people don't interact with other people from other parts of the country, you're going to view yourselves as different from those other people. Look at the United States. Look at how people from Texas and California talk about each other, right? Or New York and Texas, right? You see these vast differences between people living in the Midwest versus coastal, and that's a centrifugal force. That's a perfect example of physical distance. But what about physical features? What if you have a giant mountain range separating your country? Well, then those people are never going to talk to those other people, and it'll seem like a completely different world. So take into account physical features and just size of states when thinking about these centrifugal forces and how they can potentially impact states when we're talking about self-determination and devolutionary forces. I've ranted a lot. Ms. Green, anything to say? Am I doing okay?
You are doing great.
I'm doing great, everybody. I'm getting an A. I'm going to nail this FRQ. Okay, so for part C, identify and explain one political impact resulting from devolutionary pressures related to cultural differences in either Spain or Nigeria. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Now, this is the old format, so you won't have the identify and explain, but let's pretend like it's the new format, and it just says explain one political impact resulting from devolutionary pressures related to cultural differences. That's hard for two reasons. One, it's explained. And then two, you're getting a political and cultural, but they're being very specific about the wording. And they were very specific when we had to grade this. So it's saying, what is a political impact of cultural differences? So you have to identify the cultural difference, whether it be a difference in language, a difference in religion, a difference in ethnicity, and how is it making a political impact? And guys, they worded this really hard because the political impact is devolution. That's it. That's all you had to write, right? So there is a huge list of potential answers for this FRQ for both Spain and Nigeria. When we talk about, let's see, explain one of the following. Factors of secession, vote for devolution. Yeah, it all basically goes back to Spain, Catalonia see themselves different culturally. And what were the political impacts? Well, they voted to leave, right? We saw that vote happen. We've seen the armed conflict because of the vote. We have seen more pushes for devolution. That's a political impact. We have seen the Spanish state and the EU crack down on Catalonia. We have seen the Spanish military and police force respond to these protests by Catalonians. We have seen a rise of Spanish nationalism promoted by the central government. That's going along with them promoting the idea that Spain is a nation state. All of these are political impacts as a result of those cultural differences. So really pay attention, because the FRQ got harder the further you went into it. And this really was the bring it all together type answer, where you have to be able to connect these cultural ideas to the political impact and make a coherent statement that we could read. Now, I'm not going to rant about Nigeria because I didn't know anything about Nigeria. Yeah, your teacher doesn't know anything about Nigeria. When I graded this, I actually had to look up stuff that students wrote about Nigeria. But that goes to a bigger lesson for you. When you open up the FRQ from the AP exam, there's a chance that one of the stimulus you might not know. That's okay. Go with the one you know. Don't try to make it complicated and word vomit about Nigeria. Just talk about Spain. We've covered Spain. Now, there shouldn't be any surprises on this FRQ because we have gone through and made sure that we have used every example they have outlined in the College Board curriculum. But if something were to happen, go with what you know. What we saw on this is that students in Part B would write about Spain, even though they didn't need to, because it doesn't say to reference the stimulus. And then in Part C, they wouldn't write about Spain because they went, oh, I already wrote about it in Part B. So then they wrote stuff in Part C about Nigeria, completely making it up and not getting the points. Guys, you can repeat yourself unless it says not to, okay? Go with what you know, right? Don't try to make it complicated, okay? Because that will only result in you getting a lower grade. Okay, so I'll let you check the Nigeria stuff on your own because I'm sure an overwhelming majority of you wrote about Spain. So at the end of this, that's it. That's it for this week. I know it was a whole lot. It's a really tough unit, but we got through it. We made it. I'm going to talk a little bit more while I wait for stuff to come through Remind to kind of kill some time. I'm not seeing anything pop up on my phone, but I will give it some time. Miss Green, do you have anything?
No.
No.
Good to go.
Okay, so while I'm waiting, just to give you guys a pep talk, to give you ideas of what we are seeing. Next week is the last review of content, and it's Unit 5. It's agriculture. It's easy. You can do this. The following week, we're going to practice FRQs, and then it's test time. You have 2 more weeks with us. That's it. 2 more. You've put in an entire year's worth of work, right? And I know this stay-at-home coronavirus, it sucks. It does. I am so tired of being around my wife for the month and a half. Let me tell you. No, I'm kidding. But it's tough. And our relationships with our families are being stressed. You know, you're seeing the same people every day inside of the same house, confined to the same walls. And you're thinking, why am I doing schoolwork so much? And 2 more weeks. Okay. That's it. And Ms. Green and I have both talked about it. After the AP exam, we don't plan on giving any work, guys. We need you to commit these next 2 weeks, 100%. Keep it up. You guys are doing fantastic. All of my students have been turning in all of their work overwhelmingly. You've been so accommodating to the work. You've communicated clearly. You guys are absolutely crushing it. I don't want to say the same things for Ms. Green students because I don't know, but I'm sure you're just as amazing. And I'm sure Ms. Green would say the same thing. So that's where we're at. I got 2 questions now. Can you explain the issue over the Balkan Peninsula? Okay, the Balkan Peninsula, when we refer to that, we're just talking about Balkanization in Yugoslavia. That's just a fancy way to try and confuse you because we always refer to it as Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia is in the Balkans, and that's why they call it Balkanization. So if you're confused about what's going on in the Balkans, just refer back to your Yugoslavia notes. And really, that just is, it was a multi-ethnic state that once the USSR fell, we saw all these different ethnicities and nationalities inside Yugoslavia get this idea of self-determination, and they wanted to devolve and make their own state. Well, the problem is, once they started devolving and making their own state and establishing sovereignty, some states started to attack other states to get their land and were ethnically cleansing 2 ethnicities inside of former Yugoslavia. And the original government no longer existed because all these states eventually broke off, or all these ethnicities eventually broke off into their own individual states. So tied to the fact that the original government doesn't exist and there was ethnic cleansing to fight over land is what makes this unique and what makes it Balkanization. It's no longer devolution. It started as devolution, but now it is uniquely Balkanization. And we have never seen that anywhere else in the world. So I hope it clears that up. And then how will we be graded on the exam? If there's 2 FRQs, how does it weigh in the scores 1 through 5? I don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't. I'll tell you after the fact when I'm a reader, but I don't know, guys. I'm so sorry. Just crush it, okay? Just go for it. Use your time. Use all of it. Write everything you know. You guys know, I don't know if you feel confident, but I feel confident in you. You guys know a lot. You guys know a lot of vocab. You understand a lot of concepts. Just when you sit down to do it, actually, I want to save all that AP exam stuff for a later video. Do we know what platform we're using? Whatever one you choose, I guess. I don't know. When they send you the email, we'll go from there. I know they are going to do a simulation test. I know that's going to happen. They have to. So when we get that, we'll have more answers. But besides that, I really don't think I'm seeing any more questions. And like I said, you're doing fantastic, everybody. To my 46 stuff, for those that aren't dealing with a lot of stuff, I'm glad you're still working. Enjoy it. Enjoy, being at home and being able to play video games constantly, whatever it is, Animal Crossing, or for me, Final Fantasy. For those that are struggling, I appreciate you. You're amazing. Keep up the good work. And if there's any way that I can help or Ms. Green can help, we are absolutely here to help. And we will make sure that you're successful. Besides that, another week done. Wrap that up. So if you need any help, we will do a Zoom Q&A on Monday. Those have been a riot. We've had tons of fun. You've missed out if you haven't been to one. But we ask that you bring questions if you have any that week. I'll post answers to the packet. And that's it, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy your weekend.